Good afternoon, everyone. This is going to be my fourth and final review of the select episodes I've chosen for this Band of Brothers overall series review. So this week we're looking at episode 9, which is titled Why We Fight. In terms of the character this episode follows, it mostly centers around Lewis Nixon and his experience, what he's going through. We really see the mental strain it's putting on him in terms of being a leader and seeing all these people around him die and not actually being involved in the action. But when I say this episode focuses on him, it does, but that's really not the main theme of the episode. There's one event in particular that happens that answers the question that the title poses, why we fight. We see the men of Easy Company in this episode discover a German concentration camp. That's really the big focus here, and that's mostly what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to focus on that specific part of this episode and what it shows us historically and what it shows us about viewer engagement and cinema. So to begin, in terms of the historical accuracy of the men of Easy Company finding a concentration camp, they actually weren't the specific people who did find it. The men of Easy Company never liberated a concentration camp, so the specific camp in this episode is called Kaufering Lager Fourth, and it's a sub-camp, and it was actually found by the 134th Ordnance Maintenance Battalion of the 12th Armored Division. So they took this scenario that is historical, this camp was found by US soldiers, and they kind of gave it to Easy Company. Now this may not sit well with people because it wasn't actually these men who found the camp or stumbled across it as is presented in the episode, but the reasoning for this is to kind of take the focus away from them as a group and present an absolutely horrific event that was caused by this war. So even though Easy Company weren't the actual men to find this camp, the way the discovery of it and the subsequent actions is shown is apparently very historically realistic. So if we put it out of our minds that these men weren't the actual individuals, we can focus on the positives that come from including what is a real historic event and focus on the way that the history of this camp in particular and concentration camps being found by Allied forces happened in history and how it's presented in the episode. So in the episode, Easy Company opens the gates of the camp and some of the prisoners begin to walk out, and the immediate first concern is how to get these individuals food. So the men of Easy Company go to the town where they're currently staying. They get bread, they get cheese, they do gather a bunch of food and bring it back to the prisoners that were in the camp. And after a little while, a kind of higher up medic comes and explains that the men in the camp need to actually be put back in, locked back up, and kept under surveillance. They needed to be monitored. So in history, this actually did happen. The prisoners were made to stay inside the camp for a number of reasons. Their recovery did need to be monitored. These men had lost the ability to properly digest food, and to give them too much, which is explained in the episode, would actually make them eat themselves to death. Their food intake needed to be monitored as well as their general health. Another reason that isn't presented in the show, but historically that these prisoners had to stay in the camp, was because they were able to spread a lot of diseases. A lot of the people in concentration camps carried a lot of diseases, and the people outside of the camp needed to be protected from that. So again, it's all about monitoring these individuals and their health. A third reason that is briefly mentioned in the show and is also historical is that there wasn't sufficient space or lodging for these men to go to outside of the camp. This is not to say in any way that the lodging inside the camps was even the least bit adequate, but all it meant was that there wasn't a place in town where they could take these individuals, keep monitoring their health, making sure they didn't spread disease, and have lodging available for them. So I think it's really important when we're looking at this event, even though it wasn't Easy Company that discovered the camp historically, the way it's presented is apparently quite faithful to actual historical accounts of different Allied groups discovering these camps. And I'm glad they included it in the episode. I really think the purpose was to answer that question, why we fight. So many men in this episode are questioning, what's the point? And then them seeing this thing that's happening, they're reminded what their purpose is, why they're there, what they're doing. Now moving on to the more artistic side in terms of audience engagement and cinematic value. Boy oh boy is the discovery of this subcamp emotionally packed and charged based off of many factors that allowed it to be so. So I found a really interesting article where a professor of film actually analyzed this episode and analyzed what the discovery of the camp looked like and if it relates to historic footage. So this is really an intersection of these two parts that I analyzed, historical accuracy and cinematic value. What's right in the middle of that is film and recordings that were taken during the historic events. So what he has to say is, as the audience, we are experiencing this through their eyes. The scene provides an imaginable presentation of something hard to depict on screen. The whole mise-en-scène tries to tie in with the documented images, the muddy squares, the skinny bodies, the empty gazes, the corpses. Band of Brothers stays very close to the documents and to these filming methods and is successful in depicting a historical simulation for audiences. So this professor of film has kind of given this depiction his okay and his approval based on historic footage. So we can see this in the colors that are kind of used. We can see this in the movement of the camera. We can certainly see this in performances of the actors across the board. Every single individual, it's believable what they're experiencing, and it's very emotional and very hard-hitting. And I think something that's so difficult to talk about with the Holocaust and so difficult to explain is the severity of it. And like I've said in different reviews, it's one thing to read about an event and it's one thing to kind of see it unfold. And when you look at the statistics of these people that were killed and how many people were put in these camps and just treated as subhuman beings, it's awful and it's horrendous and you feel something. And what this episode does, it kind of zooms in on this travesty. It focuses on an individual discovery of a camp. And so even if you're not familiar with the show, it's really powerful in just showing the destruction of human life and the disregard for these people and how they were treated and the conditions that they were forced to live in. And it's just one microcosmic example that makes you think about this representation, and then in your head you can kind of expand and multiply that. So I think as hard as it is to watch, in terms of using it in a classroom, in terms of teaching people about the Holocaust as an event, it's not an all-encompassing history of it. Of course, that's not what it's aiming to do, but it is successful in showing in a very realistic way the emotional and physical trauma that these people had to go through. And of course, we can never understand that or relate to that, but we can see it and reflect on it and reflect on what it means and why it happened. And it makes you realize anew just this terrible thing that happened that we can never forget. One last thing that I'll mention in terms of just the cinematic value, because I can't not mention it, is the music that plays at the beginning, at the end of this episode. So the way it's filmed, the episode begins with a cut of Easy Company soldiers listening to music, just kind of an impromptu little concert of these German individuals playing a song, and then it zooms in on them, and then we go back I think like a month or so to the events that lead up to the discovery of the camp, and then at the very end it comes back to this moment of these Germans playing music. If I had to give you one example of music that's used effectively to create emotion and to show emotion and to just totally perfectly represent a feeling of what somebody's experiencing in a moment, it would be this piece in this scene. It's just so incredibly done. It perfectly encapsulates what the German citizens are feeling, what the American soldiers are feeling, what the individuals in these subcamps and concentration camps and death camps are feeling. It's the most melancholic, almost without hope thing you've ever heard, and it's just so powerful. So I know this review wasn't exactly an all-encompassing review of this episode as a whole. I did really want to focus in on the discovery of the sub-camp that happens in this episode. I really just wanted to highlight the importance of the horrific history of the Holocaust in this review, because it is something that as a teacher I will be discussing with my class in history classes, and it's something that everybody in the general public should know about and needs to remember. So thank you for watching. This is my last official review of an episode. I might do something next week to just kind of wrap up my thoughts in all and what it's made me think about and what I discovered. But yeah, that's all for now. So thanks.